So there is this beautiful little town in Japan called Hamada City, and it faces the Sea of Japan, so it has these beautiful beaches. It's lined with gorgeous mountains, making agriculture and fishing just a way of life for the people here. It was a very simple, a very quiet existence for the residents, which makes what happened in the latter part of 2009 that much more shocking. A mushroom collector, he was foraging high up in the mountains, and today was like any other day for him, except that he spotted a very large, most beautiful mushroom cap sticking out of the earth. He was filled with joy to have even spotted such a treasure. So he brushes the leaves aside, sticks his hands underneath to unearth his treasure. What he unearthed was the severed head of a woman. He felt his soul leave his body. He screams and runs down the mountain to get help. And then days after this discovery, the Hamada Police Department gets numerous phone calls about a white Corolla that was driving erratically. The driver was a man and the passenger was a woman. They were swerving on the road and into the road's railings. Then something completely inexplicable happened. People were reporting that the car was continuously backing up and slamming into the rail over and over again. And once the police arrived, that little white car backed up, accelerated into that mangled railing one more time, and completely burst into flames, and both the man and the woman died. And so, in the span of 2 days, 2 unexplained tragedies were forced onto the otherwise peaceful Hamada City. Now, although these 2 events happened days apart and miles away from each other, both would be connected, and they would be more disturbing than anyone ever imagined. And if you guys are enjoying the story so far, don't forget to like and subscribe. Shout outs to my Patreons. Much love. On October 26 of 2009, 19-year-old college student Miyako Hiraoka closed up the ice cream parlor that she worked at promptly at 9 p.m. She grabbed her purse and a large trash bag to discard at the bin outside. Now, the parlor was located inside the mall, so once she locked up, she still had to make her way out of the fairly large building. Other shops were already closed as well, so she was basically walking alone through an empty mall. Now, there was a security guard and security cameras, so she didn't necessarily feel unsafe. Now, as she was walking, lugging that large trash bag, it's not far-fetched to believe what she was thinking about was Russia, because she was in a foreign exchange program where she was about to experience a new culture in a new country in Russia. Now, Miyako loved the beautiful simplicity of her little Hamada city, but she also yearned for the adventure. She was only a first-year college student after all, so she had a whole life ahead of her. She was saving up her money by taking as many shifts at this parlor as she could. She was never the type that took things for granted, and she worked for the things that she wanted. These were probably the thoughts that were going through her head as she reached the mall exit. Now, we do know that every night after work, she had to make a decision. It's either take the bus back to her dorms at Shimane College, or she could just walk back and save money. We also know from her friends that on many occasions, she would choose the latter and just walk to save that money. But the path that she had to take is described as something straight out of a scary movie, because she had to cut through these dark woods, and it was 9 p.m. at night. Although it was a path that she took several times before, but then it was with a coworker, but that coworker, she had just recently quit. And now she was making this decision on her own, and it wouldn't surprise any of her friends or anybody that knew her if her thought process was, what's a few scary little trees if it meant saving money for Russia? Well, we know that Miyako never got on that bus that night. And we also know that she never made it back to her dorms. She had vanished. When Miyako missed her shift the following afternoon, the owner of the ice cream shop, already down one employee, was understandably upset that he couldn't count on another. So, after failing to reach Miyako, he called Miyako's mother. And once the two began to talk, they both grew very concerned because it was not like Miyako at all to ditch responsibilities. And then Miyako's mother remembered something. She remembered that she had just talked to her daughter last night, and Miyako had promised her that she would call her once she got back to the dorm safely. It had slipped her mind, but now it came crashing back to her in a wave of panic, and the police would be immediately called after this conversation. Now, Hamada City, to its residents, had always felt safe, so when one of their daughters goes missing, the police and the community, they take it very seriously. First order was to watch the mall security footage. 9:16 p.m. They see her close up the ice cream parlor and walk to the exit of the mall. And that was it. There was no other cameras that would show what happened to the girl afterwards. And the mystery would just send this shockwave through the community. Did they have a kidnapper? God forbid, a killer loose in their city? And suddenly, Hamada City was on edge, and every day that would pass, if without a sign of Miyako, was another indication that there was something really wrong. Doors began to lock, and people began to think twice about walking alone. Even curfews for the students were set, and police, they would dedicate all their best detectives and manpower to this case, but only to be left frustrated. There was no footage, no sightings, not even a tip. She had basically disappeared without a trace. Now, of course, without a body, Miyako's family and friends, they held out hope that she would come back to them one day. But it was then on November 6th of 2009, that's 11 agonizing days later, the mushroom collector would find that decapitated head of a woman, and it would turn out to be that of Miyako Hiraoka. So now her loved ones are devastated. It would take the police 2 days of intense searching until the team was satisfied that they found what they could. What was deduced from the remains was that she was beaten and then strangled to death. The killer tried to burn the body at some point before scattering all this around, but in terms of evidence, the police were still just as stumped as to who could do this and why. Miyako was a sweet and lovable girl that had no enemies, and unfortunately, this actually made it even harder for the police because now you don't even know where to begin. They had no suspects, they needed a starting point, and it just ended with mall footage. They called in psychologists to characterize, what kind of person, to profile what kind of person would murder in such a brutal manner. And what they got back was that the person who killed her didn't know her. It was likely a man between the ages of 20 and 40, and unfortunately, this was a random crime, just a crime of opportunity. And that simply just wasn't much for police to go on. And so the days and the weeks, they would just continue to pass. Now, the local media did their part to keep the memory of Miyako alive, and it would eventually become a national story in Japan. Now, journalists from all around came to Hamada City, reporting in front of the ice cream parlor, the Charmaine College, and even in front of her parents' house. Now, me personally, I take anything remotely paranormal with a grain of salt, as I would advise anyone to do. So here's an account of something that happened live on TV that was very chilling. So a TV crew set themselves up right in front of the forest that Miyako would have had to walk through that night. And I'm telling you, when you see this is actually really scary. I don't know how Miyako and her coworker ever got the courage to walk into black nothingness. And so the reporter, he's just reporting, describing the story, when the viewers at home, the live viewers at home, heard something else other than his voice. Now guys, put on some headphones if you want to hear this. IEMs if you got them, and tell me in the comments below if you think you heard a disembodied voice. 広島県北広島町の我流山の林道の入り口です。広島県北広島町の我流山の林道の入り口です。広島県北広島町の我流山 I had to hear it 2 or 3 times, and I started to hear it. It did sound like a woman with a deep voice saying, "This is very painful. Why only me?" And so the reporter and the cameraman, when they heard what people were saying, they swore up and down that they didn't hear anything while they were reporting it, and they have no women on their crew. It was all men. When they watched their own footage back, they too heard the female voice. And it was this clip that transcended this story from just local to international. The world was fascinated as well as horrified by these events. But regardless of the notoriety that the case got, the main objective was still unsolved. There was still no justice for Miyako. Months would turn into years, and the case would lose interest and go cold. 7 whole years would pass before a cold case team would reopen this case again to take a fresh look at their city's most high-profile mystery. And it was then that one of the sharp minds of the detectives actually realized something that the previous ones didn't. The old detectives tried to place any existing bad actors around the time and place of the scene of the crime. What they didn't do was account for new bad actors. And this is when the detective pulled a file on a man named Yoshiharu Yano, a 33-year-old convicted rapist from Tokyo. It was learned that after he served time in prison, he left Tokyo and traveled 500 miles to live in Shimane Prefecture with his mother, which put him in the vicinity of Miyako that night. They went through all the old footage, and it's a wonder what you're able to see now that you actually have something that you're looking for. They spotted a car that belonged to Yoshihara, or one that looked like it, driving around the dark forest that night. They spotted that same car again heading towards the mountains where Miyako's remains would be found. But there was one more bit of evidence that the police would find that would basically take away any doubt that he was their killer. Police confiscated the belongings of Yoshihara at the home he used to live in at the time. They find a digital camera. Yoshiharu had documented what he did to Miyako that night with 40 pictures in that camera of the most vile acts. But of course, the main question was, where is this son of a bitch right now? Where is Yoshiharu Yano right now? He was nowhere to be found, although there would actually be no need to find him. Do you remember that white Corolla at the top of the video I told you guys about? The man driving was Yoshiharu Yano, crashing repeatedly into that guardrail until the car exploded and he burned alive. The woman that was in his passenger seat, that was Yoshiharu's mother, and witnesses said that she was screaming at the top of her lungs, fearing for her life, for a man to be able to do something so despicable like he did to Miyako, even saving the photos to remember it by. You have to be a very damaged individual. I have no doubts in believing that his mother knew something was off with her son. I mean, he went to prison for rape, and in any culture, especially the Japanese culture, that brings tremendous shame to the family. But, you know, I guess that was her son. That was her baby. And so, because of that, she too burned alive that day. Now, I have to tell you one more aspect of this story that kind of ties this whole thing up in some sort of horrifying little bow, and that is Yoshiharu's mother wasn't the only one reported to be screaming for her life. Witnesses say that Yoshiharu, the man inside that white car, was also screaming, equally terrified at being driven into the rails. And I say that to say this. Now, could it be that when she was alive, she was this sweet, ethereal girl on Earth, but in death turned into a vengeful demon in the afterlife? I'll let you decide. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos.